go in for the reception food. In the meantime, I just would like to introduce to you our Minister of Town, who is the Minister of Information for the Gullah Geechee Nation. Greetings, everybody. How are you doing? Good. Yeah, that means how are you? The hear y'all say it real loud. How are you doing? I am so glad and I'm really pleased to be here. Okay. To the Gullah Geechee Nation, and I also welcome you here as a family. We appreciate you coming in here because you are here. And we want you to know that we love you, we appreciate you, and of course, this is Queen Quet. She's Chieftess of the Gullah Geechee Nation. She's traveled all around the world, telling people who we are down here. And she's here today to let you know who you are. Yes, and I thank you. Gina Paige is here. Thank you so much. Put a handle on that. Put a handle on it. Dr. Gina Paige, I apologize. And thank you so much for being here for that introduction. Thank y'all. I am so excited. I don't know what to do. Thank you. Now, the time you go on, you will get the thing from there on now. Okay, please. All right. All right. And we want to let all of the children know that what you're going to today, there are plenty to do with all of you see decorated in here today. So we say Gullah Geechee Lineage and Legacy Symposium. We are right in the middle of the table. And what else? And right. Why? Hello, what? Who do we? Oh Lord, y'all been Negro? I say black. Don't say we iron that one. Okay, so you saying that our ancestors or we were slaves? So is that accurate or not? You said enslaved people harvested this. Is that accurate or not? And Dr. Toure, keep your mouth closed. Keep your mouth closed. Keep your mouth closed. Okay, what you say? Both what?
Free and enslaved.
Come on, say that loud. Say it with your chest.
Free and enslaved black people harvested rice and cotton.
And is it past tense?
Still do.
Yeah, y'all answered with a question.
Yeah.
Look, y'all, let me tell all the children something. That cotton, I just picked that cotton the other day.
Oh.
Okay? And the Rollins who come in and get to put the thing in front of this table, that rice boy, they feel it, they just harvest that other day. So ain't no it used to, ain't no other rest of people who did, and all in past tense and things like that, because some of the days the Gullah Geechee Nation now for true. So see, I just want to test you. Because we know how y'all get into we ain't supposed to do on one thing like that. So I don't want you to know what's many I'm being one the way y'all talk. And one of you is still in me and things like that, because before you would have been like y'all and things like that. See, the government man didn't know nothing but he's just being taught, so we could know what. Y'all will still about something. You can still hold on. See, this young ain't a Q-tip. This ain't called a Q-tip. Alright? This is not factory cotton, this is the real deal right here. So be very careful because you can't cut your hand. Everybody always thinks the cotton is soft. That is only the center part. The outer part is hard because it protects the center. You see? And why do we need that protection? With the Gullah Geechee Nation, there have been many reasons we need to protect our center. Because there are too many people who have written inaccurate things about us and continue to perpetuate these inaccuracies now and proliferate them across social media. So the same way you said it was something with Negroes in the past and all that is a way to now just eliminate your ethnicity altogether. And they can eliminate your ethnicity, they eliminate your humanity. And so, different terms. Many of us have lived long enough, and I'm not mad at your sister. I know why she said what she said. She was saying historically. That's what they're called. But we wouldn't be able to do this celebration tonight without vision. And my vision was, I want one complaint for heritage. And they all looked at me like, we didn't want a complaint. Because they know I don't like nobody to complain. So everybody looked like, oh. I said, I want the complaint, and you gave it to me, Sister Angel. And you gave Angel like Roy complaint. You gave me just what I told her I wanted. I didn't get it because I've been stuck in traffic. It was so much traffic trying to get to the Penn Center, I was stuck. I wanted to hear it. And that's what she said to me. She said, I'm here. You traffic. I said, thank you for that. And as she said to me there, the traffic is steady coming in the building. So I don't know what you gave to do, like the boys say, but I got to clap my hands to God on that. Beautiful array of all you. Now, how much I want to tell them what they have in Gullah Geechee? Gullah Geechee. Boy, well, you. The rest of them coming up with Yeddi, well, we go. Walk here. That's all right. So all the rest of them want to tell them to come. Right? We'd have been there, want to tell them to come. Ain't no problem. So definitely we appreciate all of you taking the time to come to this. You say in church, you thought it not robbery to be here. And who else thought it not robbery to make sure that this specific event happened is the University of Georgia. They were the first ones to say we want to make sure we support the symposium. So please applaud one of our sponsors. I also would appreciate it if you give a round of applause to our Penn Club, because they not only sponsor, but they sponsored our family and youth activities for the children on yesterday. Yesterday in the same room, we gave out over 100 Black history books to the teachers that were going to go back to the classrooms and use those books with them. And those books were provided by our Families Against Book Bans and also Planting People, Growing Justice. So give them I want to thank the 41st Annual Penn Center Heritage Days Celebration Committee members, as well as the Penn Center Board of Trustees, and our whole staff here at Penn Center, because believe me, the majority of the people that you see on these grounds running around doing stuff, they are volunteers. Yes. They have less than 12 people on staff at Penn Center. And so to run an institution that's been here since 1862 with less than 12 a year, I think they deserve the applause and the honor. And so now, I am so honored to be able to introduce you today to someone that you might have read about, you might have seen him multiple times on Instagram, you've seen him on High on the Hog, the person who has curated what is going to be a reception. Now, let me get it straight, because I know I got a bunch of college-educated kids in the Come on. I'm one of them too, so don't think like I'm outside your son. But I know how you like to do it. You like to act like you're educated until you need to know the meaning of a word. I said reception. Cool. So what that means, sir? What that means if I said reception? Light. Ooh, thank you, sir. And when we mean light, I mean me and this brother here, we know how that go, right? You know us in our community, we don't be doing no light plays, right? So we ain't doing dinner. That's not, this ain't dinner place. So don't come out here. Talk about, how come I can hold my plate in my hand? Don't you dare write a note back here with no bad reviews. That's right. And so there you go. So I done told you it's what kind of food now? Reception food. And you need some salve and all kind of things. You got plenty of herbs. Something before the dance. All right, that's some rubber meat early. The bed on this side, the bed on that side, the ice on this side, the hot on that side. However you gotta do it. But I don't want to hear no noise tomorrow. I'm clean. What's wrong with you? Okay? So yeah, we're working out to work a lot more. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with this table right here. You will go in to Chef BJ Dennis, and he will serve you first. And all of what we're serving is vegetarian, it's vegan, so no one has to worry about it. Boy, and you all right? That food be good? All right. Now you're working out in a light flatbed. I ain't doing that kind of thing. Okay, that sounds better now. So now, we are finally here at the hour that I have been waiting on for most of the time that we've been planning this event this year. Because it gives me an honor and a privilege to sit with individuals that I know that they are not adorning themselves in the culture today because this is a festival, and come Monday they take it off and become somebody else. And I know some of y'all saying, because y'all either know people like that or that is you. Amen. I heard you say, but that could have been for yourself. All right. You know, like TP said, you can't hide from yourself because everywhere you go, there you are. So I know that with these individuals, they show who they are. No matter who it is that's in office somewhere, no matter who it is that has said to them over the years that they did not shine like the black gold that I said that we are, no matter what someone else said to try to deter them from the work that they are doing, they stayed committed to this work. One person that did our workshop yesterday, digging for Gullah Geechee roots, I have known her for decades now. And I would just like you all to meet and give a round of applause to Dr. Ramona LaRoche. And then you know in the family, usually the elders go first and we let the new children go last. And then like that, let's say with food, most time mom and them the children eat, and then the mom and them might be after them, you see? So this your time and thing like that, and we could let the little children eat something first. And then we could let the elders speak, you see? The little children would be in this your group today, filling in for somebody else who couldn't make it across the big pond, who she originally from Trinidad, but she over there with the buckaroo in Britain. And then she see that these buckaroo over in the Africa, so she said, I don't think it'd be wise for me to come here. And I said, and I do agree. And so filling in for Dr. Cassandra Gupta is Sister Angel Parsons. And I am mad about having no angels in the building. Come on out, angels. Come on out, brothers and the garden. And the top cup for also sponsoring this year's Penn Center Heritage Day celebration. Thank you so much. And so if you pay attention to this exhibit about sea island cotton, I created this exhibit probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually. And so all the exhibits you see, I curated from the Gullah Geechee out in Gullah archive primarily. But about the cotton, I did this exhibit and wanted specific pieces from what is called the Cottonopolis edition that the Guardian did. And the interesting thing about connecting with the Guardian was they actually contacted me because the last time I was in England, speaking in England, I kept saying all the previous times that I would eventually go to Manchester. Because anybody remember Smoking Joe Frazier?
Yeah.
Okay, where y'all think he's from?
Right here.
Right here.
Thank you for the right answer, because he's not from Philadelphia. Okay? He is from Beaufort County, South Carolina. In fact, he's from a specific area we call Burton Town. So
That's
no
right.
doubt they would bring a champ up out of that. All right? And so Joe Frazier was very near and dear. He was family to me and my family. We partied with Joe and his family so much, y'all need to mind your business because I'm not telling you no story. All right? But definitely, so I was very honored when someone from
England came and asked me about his history that he had researched, and he said, wait a minute, he's not from Philadelphia. I said, no, he's not. He said, yeah, I know. I told him, and he said, but so he's Gullah Geechee. I said, that's right. He said, so tell me about that. And I said, well, that's what gave him his strength to fight. That's who he comes from. And so the film, Joe Frazier, When the Smoke Clears, was actually produced by a filmmaker from Manchester. So every time we would stay in touch when I was in England, we could not connect when I was in England. And I just knew when I got to Manchester, he would be, I could just come to his front door. Well, I flew in and he flew out to make another film. He said, but Queen, you can go ahead. I'm so sorry I'm going to miss you. Right? I said, it's quite all right. So I went around the city because I found out something I thought was strange. They said they had Abraham Lincoln as a statue in Manchester. And I went looking for Abraham Lincoln's statue, walking up and down. I mean, walked 25 blocks or more looking for this thing. But along the way, I kept finding buildings where cotton was in the walls. I would go in the building and ask a question and turn around and read all this history and little cotton bowl things and strange stuff. I was like, this was a cotton exchange. This wasn't a hotel. They converted it. Oh, that's how these people be doing over here. They be hiding the story, right? Worked around and around and around. I wrote my own story about that journey, and the folks from the Guardian found it. And they told me, they said, Queen Quet, guess what? Where you walked around the construction and you said you felt like you were in the right place, but the statue was gone. I said, right, but they just took it away? They said they moved it for the construction. You were in the right place. And guess what? If you had looked backwards, you would have been looking up at the window of the Guardian office. They said, so don't you worry. We'll need to bring you back to England so you can see it when they put the statue back. And so that connected us to doing statues work. So you see that there are some things on your table for the Restorative Justice Initiative that we're working on with Sister Angel and many others throughout the Gullah Geechee Nation to make sure that we have conversations about what has happened, but what can happen in the future. All right? So I'm so glad that she's here to represent the Guardian. And so someone who I feel is a guardian of Gullah Geechee culture, in particular, please do not let him story tell to you and say that we have a capital with the Gullah Geechee Nation, because we do not have it. The capital is the storytelling. The capital of the Gullah Geechee Nation is wherever the Queen is that day. Let me tell you that. But I must say, I appreciate this brother from the time he sent me an email 30 years ago when I founded the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition. And he wanted to know who in the world got the nerve to be using the term Gullah Geechee, and who are you behind this email? And we communicated by email back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't until one day we were at an A1A meeting in Savannah, Georgia. And this sister said, Queen, I need you to do a presentation tonight to a banquet room full of people. And I said, okay, about the culture? She said, yeah, but I'm going to get this brother I know, and he lives in Savannah, and he coming over too. Little did we know that these are two people who have been communicating by email for a couple of years. And then they were like, okay, what y'all gonna do? So he and I stepped out the room for what, 5 minutes and said, oh, I'm expecting you. Just what? And we were like, what? That's you? That's me. What? Okay, so we just gonna go ahead, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, blah, blah, blah. We went and presented, we finished standing ovation. These people asked us the question, so how long have you been working together? We went, however long we just presented. They're like, you're joking. They really thought we were joking. But that showed the spiritual connection. So the lifetime that he has given to this work, following in the footsteps of our ancestors like the W.W. Law of Savannah, who founded the Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum, and learning from him. And he has 2 doctorates, but he is not an educated fool by any means.
Yeah.
So I can wake him out of his sleep and ask him some history about our community. And if he doesn't know, he's humble enough. We have done this with each other. I call and say, I'm going to chew you out. I just found this and you ain't never tell me. He said, Martin Delaney, but Rachel said, help me. He said, I didn't know that myself. Tell me what you know. Right?
Yeah.
So he's humble enough to say he doesn't know, but he's also man enough to go find the answer.
Amen.
And he don't care if it's a man or woman that gives him the answer as long as the answer is correct. So I present to you Lifetime Achievement Award, Black Excellence Award, winning Gullah Geechee Nation leader, Dr. Amir Jamal Toure. A big And now, the most interesting, one of the many interesting things that happened in my life was that I heard this call to come to something called good soil. And being a farmer, I looked up. And I said, good soil. And so, it's going to be about business, about inspiring black people to make sure we have the tools that we need to be economically empowered. I mean, they blasted this, they're going on. I'm like, okay, when is this going to be? So the first one was the same time that they were going to have the International Leadership Summit the next day, and I already had tickets for that. They said, leader, I'm coming. You know, so now you said good soil, I'm planting. So I said, okay, I'm going. We went the first year, it was in Florida. That wasn't a big enough venue. They said, well, we got to leave this alone. I said, please do this ain't big enough. So it was nice, you know, we was there with Cam and all of that. I had a good time with them. I loved them, no problem. So the next year they said, we're going to Dallas. I said, that's the one city in Texas I ain't been to. I got a Queen Quet there in Houston. I've been saying I got to get to Dallas. Now it's a good reason, because there's soil I got to plant it. So if I got to bring some of that dirt back, that good soil back to St. Helena, we're going to plant some seeds that's going to grow. Well, I didn't know that when I got there to the good soil, as much as I talk about how our ancestors' blood spills in the soil, that I would be talking to someone who also talks about how our ancestors' blood still flows through our veins, how it connects us through DNA, how we connect back to the motherland. But I met then the co-founder of African Ancestry, and we walked up to one another in this Bishop Jake setting where all these VIPs were, and people were walking and engaging and talking, and they were planting into each other's souls. And I sat there and I listened to her on the stage, and I listened to her journey about how she don't capitalize on our DNA, how she goes ahead and destroys it after you get your test done, unlike the other ones who compete against her, that there is some dignity in what she is doing. She's not trying to create another Henrietta Lacks story. And if you lack knowledge on Henrietta Lacks, there's a film that I'd rather you read a book first, then watch the movie. But you need to know that story when you're talking about DNA and your ancestry. So when I reached out to Dr. Gina Paige and asked her, would she come to the Gullah Geechee Nation, I reminded her where we met. And they told me she was going to come here and then fly to Africa. And come to find out she flew from Africa to come to us. So she is bringing that African ancestry literally and figuratively with her in her spirit, in this energy, and probably some of the dust is still on her shoes from just getting back off the plane. I welcome to St. Helena Island and to the stage, Dr. Gina Paige. And so, when I asked each of them to come do it, they said yes. And then they waited for a couple months, and then they said, well, what am I doing? I said, we're going to have a dialogue. We're going to just talk. Because all the work that each one of you do connects specifically to these things that you see in the table. The cotton, the rice, the indigo. I have picked cotton and I have blended it. Right? Dr. Toure is well known for doing day clean, the African spirit day clean, and using indigo for that. And we already talked about the cotton apples. So I said all of this connects, and Dr. Edda Fields-Black is on her way from Savannah, Georgia. TSA delayed her. All right, so she landed late, and she's on the way. But let us pray she makes it safely from Savannah to here. She is making her way here now. So Dr. Edda Fields-Black, of course, she's learning the rights, writing about it, and studying about it, but from our perspective. And so I said it would be beautiful to be here where my grandfather grew rice and I grew rice. I brought hill rice back from Trinidad. Interesting for Dr. Gupta not to be here. Brought it back and was able to grow it in Carolina Gold in the same land behind my house now, where my house is sitting on where my grandfather so I was so happy when my brother, you know Ron, when Ron looked up there and said, look like you got something. And I said, what? And you would think it was Christmas time. We ran up there to that field and started looking at them right, and it was the first 3 or 4 sprigs. But we were so happy because it grew. And I felt like when I touched it, I was touching my mama's father's hand. My mother's here tonight, y'all. And she went to this school, Penn School. Yeah, she went to Penn. So if you get something wrong about harvesting right, she gonna correct your paper afterwards. All right? Or picking cotton. She glad for the boll weevil. She said, I was so happy for the boll weevil. Because of how much cotton she done picked in her life. So I thought she would be offended when we went to Hampton the other day to get the cotton, but she was not. As long as she didn't have to pick it, it's fine with her. All right? And so it was such a beautiful thing to grow that rice in that place. But Dr. Toure, I know right now you work a lot at Promised Land farmers. And that term means so much, Promised Land. And I know y'all have a center with that mule, with that foot on. Yes. All right. And so let's talk a little, let's delve deeper into this thing about the indigo. Because you know, everybody come here and eat. We don't eat indigo. So tell us more about the spiritual energy of indigo and why it's so critical even now to be doing things in the Promised Land. Because I feel the Gullah Geechee Nation is on Promised Land.
Absolutely. So, Queen, I'll throw something out there. Connections and times. One of the things, I always believe in connections and times. That when you talk about going to Trinidad and getting the rice, the hill rice in Trinidad, that rice came out of Georgia. From Gullah Geechee people from where it was, Glenn County, Georgia.
Right.
So many of us come out to make connections and ties. I can't believe it. So that rice that you got was Gullah Geechee rice.
Absolutely. And brought it
That's
back
that
home.
DNA.
And brought it back home.
Brought it back home. And so that connection. So when we talk about indigo, go throw something out there. For some of y'all, you might know about a place called Ossabaw Island, which is now owned by the state of Georgia. On Ossabaw, so I back up and say that you have various plantations. Many of us think about agricultural plantations. But we feel think about and realize that there are agricultural plantations, breeding plantations, industrial plantations, seasoning, breaking, medical, fishing plantations, lumber plantations. And so Ossabaw was tied to our lumber plantation, but prior to that, prior to 1776, it was tied to indigo. It was tied to indigo. Indigo is one again, when I talk about here, they talk about the Trinity.
Yes.
And that's supposed about the Trinity. And I said, you don't know the Trinity? Because I said, Africans were brought here by the genius of the Trinity.
That's right.
And they say, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I said, no, it's not. Cotton, rice, and indigo.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I asked them growing cotton in Africa, we went to cloth.
Yeah.
They're growing indigo, which is a green and brown plant that produces blue dye. So in Ossabaw, that's what they're doing. They're not producing this wealth that now would not be going to Britain.
Yes.
That the British would not engage in. And so when we do it in Africa, even when we do it amongst ourselves, we not have freedom, that we are not being poisoned by it. But what happens now in coastal Georgia, coastal South Carolina, that what the Caucasians going to do, and some of y'all are going to say buckra. So those who do not know what buckra means, I mean European and Caucasian. And so the buckras now, when they are now invested with regards to their indigo plantations, they're not creating this noxious fuel that is not out there, that is not basically poisoning our people. That again, so we romanticize, we look at movies and see blue hands and see the blue tent. We don't play no games like that. That is insanity and disrespectful to our ancestors. But some of y'all, nah, I'm not talking to any of y'all, talking about outside here. They want to play the game and have their blue hands. You don't understand the pain and the anguish that went on. Colonel Island in Liberty County, Georgia, they discussed how the fumes again would go to the neighbors that they could smell it. And it was so noxious that you got the children out there, you got the elders out there, and so now they bring their wealth for this nation. And so with regards to indigo production, that again, it is poisonous to us. But today we romanticize it, and but we understand that is part of the early wealth, and you all know why it ceased to stop 1776. The American Revolution, because the major providers for indigo were here in this area, the major purchaser of it was the Brits. Now, when we now have the American Revolution, we see indigo down to by the wayside. We see the rise of other things. We see that rice now becoming even more prominent. We see the cotton becoming more prominent. But I want us to always think about how poisonous it was and and how we cannot romanticize.
Right.
But it is a part of our genes.
Yes.
It's part of the genes of our ancestors that's still within our DNA.
Absolutely.
You say it's in the pinky fingers of it. So, and I really like to talk about that rice too, but we know we're going to have time.
Yeah,
And I don't know if
we'll
I said
find
take
out.
up the time right now.
We gonna
All right.
get-
Even though Savannah, the capital
No,
of Geechee Nation,
no,
and you know that we resort to
And we
that.
might give you that.
Yeah.
Storytelling. Anyway, but it's interesting to mention the DNA because there is a Carolina Rice organization, Carolina Gold Rice Organization. So some of them came to Trinidad when I was in Trinidad and they heard me speak there, the archives and everything. So after that, I suddenly got invitations to come to their meetings right in Charleston where I was never invited before that. Isn't that interesting? And so here it is that I'm one of the very few Gullah Geechee people that's been invited to these meetings. But one of the meetings happened at an institution where they were doing the DNA on the rice, so that they can then figure out where the strains come from. And of course, we know how they're going to think about how to hybrid those strains too. They're not just doing dry on solar, you would say. And so it's interesting you mentioned that DNA. And so when you start talking about also who were the purchasers and who funded wars, well, cotton, when I did my book, From We Sold to the Soil, Cotton, Rice, and Indigo, that was one of the major things that I realized when I had been to England a long time ago, that in Liverpool, those ships that were being built, that many of our ancestors were forced to build, those were the ships that also, during the U.S. Civil War, were the ones trying to go back and forth because they wanted to still run the cotton because the cotton was funding war, you see? And so that's why I keep going and looking more for that and walking on soles of my shoes, trying to get in these archives of these places and spaces. So that's why going to England and seeing it was one thing. It was a whole other thing for England to come to we and say the Guardian wants to do this cottonopolis. But now to say they want to do restorative justice. So, Sister Angel, that's the thing. How in the world did the Guardian, now how's this connection? What's the Scots Trust? What's the Guardian? And why now would they want to have dialogues about restorative justice? But more so, how did those dialogues come about just because they wrote some stories about cotton? What the cotton picking message is behind that?
What is the cotton picking message? Well, I mean, we're all aware of the murder of George Floyd in 2020 that really sparked a global conversation around systemic racism and societal disenfranchisement from a global perspective. And so with that, the United Nations Human Rights Commission came forward as a part of the celebration of people for African descent to stand firm and say there needs to be something done from a global perspective. And so at that forum, they wrote out different priorities as we look at how to address the global systemic racism. And a part of that was reparatory justice, directly addressing those harms, and then looking at means of repair and redress. And so many global institutions know that they have ties to transatlantic enslavement, but many of them, for various reasons, never were interested in looking into that. It could be for fear, it could be for that scary word of reparations that the United States is afraid to talk about, but for whatever reason, they chose not to address it. And in that time, the Guardian, the Scots Trust, those board members knew that the Guardian had some ties to transatlantic enslavement. And so with that, they reached out to the University of Hull for an independent research study to truly look into the ties that the Guardian had to transatlantic enslavement as a first step. And that first step was a large first step. The first phase of research came out in 2021, and it showed global connections in Brazil, in Jamaica, and then right here in the USC Islands, specifically in Charleston, on Edisto Island, Johns Island, Beaufort County, St. Helena Island, Hilton Head Island, as well as McIntosh County, Georgia, St. Simon's Island, and Savannah, Georgia. And so with that, they shared that study, and they shared the work that they were looking to do as a part of redress. And so I don't have any cotton capital issues with me, but if you were a part of any of the community engagement that we've been working on over the last 3 or 4 months, you may have a copy, you can get it online. But that was the Guardian's, really their initial print to talk about their connections from a global perspective. And so Cotton Capital has been very successful, and even now it has a podcast because those things need to be ongoing. And so with this being said, they knew that they needed to commit to true repair. And so as a part of repair, the Guardian has created the Legacies of Enslavement program that is a $10 million, 10 million pounds commitment across the entire program towards repair, towards redress, directly funding programs that are led by descendants in communities that have connections to this enslavement. And so, of course, we're sitting in a room full of individuals. I know a few of you raised your hand when Queen Quet asked me you were Gullah Geechee, but I assure you there's a lot more when you begin to look at the lineage and the legacy and the ties. And so as a part of the research and what the Guardian calls the smoking gun, we were able to find the W.G. and J. Strutt invoice book. And if you know anything about the Strutts, they were large Sea Island cotton merchants across South Carolina and also in Georgia. And so they were responsible for lots of the exportation of Sea Island cotton from about 1794 until 1825. And so during that time period, the Strutts purchased, or the Strutts sold and worked with John Edward Taylor, who was the founder of the Guardian. And so as a part of that invoice book, what we realized is Sea Island cotton, it all mattered where you got it from. The quality and the quality of the cotton, that played a major role in the value that they were able to assess from it once they got over to Britain. And so with that being said, many of those enslavers are also known as planters here in the Sea Islands. They branded their cotton with their plantation name. And so we were able to use that information to then humanize the enslaved laborers who did the work, our ancestors who did the work to make them rich. And so we use that information, we use that data to identify, and now working in phase 3 of research, to continue to identify and restore dignity to those individuals, our ancestors, that were enslaved on those plantations. And so that work is ongoing in terms of the research. The research has not stopped because we recognize that it is something that's lacking and been lacking in our communities, is the research, and those that are willing to fund the research and assist us in bringing down that brick wall of information so that we can trace our lineage. But also as a part of this, as I said, is the restorative justice piece, and that is where I'm privileged to serve as the program manager here for the USC Islands, working directly with individuals like Queen Quet, like Dr. Jamal Toure. There are several other individuals in the room that we work with and been able to share this program with, but we are looking forward to more. And so as a part of my role, it is my job to come in and hear what the community needs in terms of how to rebuild our communities. It's not just on the ground here, like I said, in the Sea Islands, but it's happening in Brazil. The conversations are happening in the Netherlands. There are many other institutions that are looking into their connections to transatlantic enslavement. And the hope is that we will create a global movement towards reparatory justice and reparations, so that there can be true policy reform, so that we can truly address the systemic oppression for hundreds of years and truly build the communities and restore economic agency in our own communities, so that we can have the ownership that we should have had for the niggas in the mule.
Yes, it is a blessing because we did get our acres, not the 40 though. They owe me some more. All right, give some more. Now that's something. Give some more. Give some more. All right, and it's very interesting because everything's about perspective. So I remember having a conversation with our governor, and I said, well, okay, so governor, when you're finished, what you're going to do? Oh, we have to do stuff in my land. I said, oh, so you have a lot of land? He said, no, I only have a little bit. I only have 400 acres. And so for our families who never got the full 40, I said, what a perspective. Now I was married. I want to be him when I grow up. That's how I took that. Because my thing was, okay, if you think 400 is a little bit, when we around here thinking 4 is a little bit,
catch up to your little bit. I want that little bit. So I said, well, what are you going to do with it? He said, walk. Walk on it. So he's not going to be a destructionaire and build on the things. He's going to walk on it, just like it is, and keep it natural and open space. And so I appreciated that response. And so every time I'm traveling through the Sea Islands and I'm looking at the expanse of land like St. Helena that we protected from destructionaires, because this is considered the epicenter of Gullah Geechee culture that you are sitting in. And for the last 3 years, we have been embroiled in battle to protect this space and hold from the chalet that they have. You see? And so here it is, when you say that, and you say that, I can picture all the images that we've seen in people's homes and the museum here of actually folks with a hand on the plow. And you say, he put a hand on the plow, hold on, hold on. And oh, that good, y'all still know what they're saying. Stop with me. And then you know, now plenty of y'all here might know the other version, as you may call it today, the remix. And it said, I know the one thing we did right was the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on. Go on till I'm clear. So yeah, when we hear the spirituals, know that those were first codified, written down here on St. Helena. So when they had their hands on the plow, they moved at a certain pace. They kept cadence. Just like if you were on the boat, you sang and you kept cadence. So all of our spirituals have a tone and a melody for a reason. Some are work songs, some are shout songs, some are funeral dirge songs, some of these various versions, and other people who think they're ethnomusicologists think that they can alter those tones and it means the same thing, but it doesn't. You change it, you change the soul of what it is. And I've heard it and it disturbs my soul. Because I can tell that they don't know what they mean and they don't know what we mean about maybe keep their hand on the plow and plowing through that same soil energy where our ancestors' blood, sweat, and tears is in it because of the toil that they went through. So it's interesting when we start talking about blood. I know we sing church songs all the time. I know we love the blood and all of that. But it's interesting, Dr. Paige, people don't normally in the black community like bloody jobs. Right? I know y'all cutting up them chicken and stuff, y'all don't be caring though. But don't like bloody jobs. So it'd be kind of interesting, you know, to sit there and then suddenly decide, but I want to figure out what it's going to lead. How far back will it take? Like, how did this come about in your mind? What led you to thinking about, I not only want to just know my own African ancestry, but I want to help others, but we might need to go back to the blood. We might need to test that out and see how that works. What led to this journey that created African ancestry?
Thank you. So the journey started with my co-founder, Dr. Rick Kittles. He is an African-American, he's a black gold.
There we go, come on, let's go.
He's a black gold.
Yes.
And to make a long story short, he was in study circles and in DC and was learning the history and learning from the scholars, and that combined with his own just innate curiosity about where he was from and why he was different than all the white people that he had been educated, white kids and young people that he had been educated with, kind of culminated. He was doing his PhD research on the Finnish people, the people of Finland, and their ancestry. And it clicked for him that if he could do this for Finnish people, that he should be able to do it for us. And answer the question that many people have, which is where am I from? Everybody isn't Gullah Geechee.
Right.
Everybody isn't from Trinidad.
Could you say that part again? Oh, I'm sorry.
But you know, most of us, as black gold people here in the U.S., know we're from Africa. African genetic lineages. And by that I mean DNA, maternally inherited DNA, and paternally inherited DNA from all over Africa, thinking that if he could find his DNA somewhere else in the world, then he has to share ancestry with those people living in that place today. And so that's really how it started. And this was well, he started doing the research in the 90s, the data collection in the 90s. We launched African Ancestry in 2003. And what happened was he was at Howard University, and they were excavating a federal land in Lower Manhattan to build a building, and they came, not Howard, but the powers that be. The government there.
Yes. The government there.
And they unearthed a cemetery of enslaved, formerly enslaved black gold. I'm trying to follow the directions that I was given. And so they had to halt the excavation. And Dr. Kittles was part of the team of researchers, and his job was to identify the ancestry of the bones in the cemetery. And when the media got that story and shared it, Howard then was inundated with phone calls, and their switchboard got shut down one day because so many black people were like, I want you to do that for me. And so that was really when it became a business idea, because he's a researcher, he's not a business person. It's no shade.
No.
We each have our way.
Yeah.
And so at that point, he and I were introduced by a colleague who had been collaborating with him on the psychological impact of people knowing where they're from. And then we partnered so that I commercialized his research to make it available for anyone.
And it's so deep. This is such a spiritual connection.
Yeah.
And you know where I'm going right now. I know it. I see it in your face. Because prior to founding the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition, which is the oldest organization in world history with the term of Gullah Geechee in its name, prior to founding that, I had an organization called the African Cultural Arts Network. African with a K and culture with a K, so it's a common. And so we were part of stopping the building on top of those ancestors. We were part of it. And so we were part of pushing to say that we want to know who these people are to us, because you were telling us that you have found African beads in the holes. They're still there. The beads are around waistline. You were saying that the mother had a baby in her arms. There were various things that were coming out about what they found when they excavated. But we were like, everything you're saying is African. So therefore, the likelihood is that these are Africans, and not only this burial area that is called now the African Burial Ground, which is government shut down because it's part of National Park Service right now, but that's a sidewalk. That now, actually, that area is outside of Wall Street. So that is where it was fine for us to work inside the wall, but when you died, you of no use, so we put you over the wall and out the city, right? So outside of Wall Street. So now here it is, we're like, wait a minute. There's too many roads leading back to the motherland. And we don't want Barbara hands handling these roads. So we said, you have to be able to find some black person that can do this research. Y'all gotta be kidding. I never knew this connected back to the world. So you see how powerful this is?
And I was the founder.
Come on!
I came here.
Okay.
It's
Exactly. So it's all tied together. But now, it is deep because these ties about family and connection. This award-winning speaker, I hadn't read a good 400-500-page document or book in some years because I don't have time. Not because I don't like to read. But when this book came out and I saw the title show, and I said, Combee, and I was always saying Combee, I just like Combee. Combee. Okay, so, but they said, Combee. I said, Combee? What that? What? There's a book about the river? What are you doing? And it was like, I looked. I said, wait a minute. This book is about Harriet Tubman? Oh, then I have to get it to add to my collection. Well, I want y'all to know why I have a collection of things about Harriet Tubman.
Come on.
I've been reading since I was 3 years old, and back then when you went in a library, I could find very few books that had any images on it on the cover that looked like me. But the ones that I did was usually about Harriet Tubman, George Washington Carver, or Booker T. Washington. So every book they had about them, I read. So I kept up with the Harriet Tubman story, and as I became an adult, I got involved with not only creating what is now the Underground Railroad Network of Freedom, but then fighting to get Harriet Tubman recognized nationally. And I would let people know I am from Beaufort County, South Carolina.
Right.
In my own research, I know that Mother Moses was in Beaufort County, South Carolina. And so I went to the Beaufort Historical Society. I asked them to please provide me with the address of the bakery that Harriet Tubman had here in downtown Beaufort. They said, who is Harriet Tubman? I looked at them and I was waiting for a joke. I was waiting for laughter. They said it. Now I had to do a history lesson and then walk away.
That's great.
That was the best thing for me to do.
Yeah.
But because they did that, they had a Beaufort history parade each year at Combee. So I decided that since y'all got Nathaniel Haywood in there, and you got Robert Smalls walking down the street, I'm going to be Harriet Tubman. And I'm going to walk down the street. And so I walked with them, and we walked to the school downtown Beaufort, and we educated those children about those 3 historic figures that had been right there in Beaufort County, South Carolina. Because Jamal and I both went to school in Beaufort County, South Carolina, and they didn't teach, they ain't about me none of this shit. Okay? Didn't say anything about any of this. And almost every night in a Gullah Geechee household, you eating rice. That's right. So I don't know how our school districts thought there was no story to tell them. How they thought there was no value in educating us about this strand that connects us. But you can't teach what you don't know. So I like to be educated. I know right now it's hard. I like the meme that says, you can't lead a horse to water. If you lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. And you can lead a man to knowledge, but you can't make him think. Same applies so long. But I prefer to have knowledge, wisdom, and overstanding. We've been under too long, so I'd like to stand over something. So when I saw this, that there was going to be this author coming to Beaufort, and she had written this book, Combee, I loaded up the car with the family members. We got to Beaufort an hour early because I just knew that the Tabernacle Baptist Church was going to be full up like y'all, full up in here like it was a joke joint. And I wasn't going to miss it anything. Well, we got there and we waited. And when I was leaving, I just gotten a copy of a Robert Smalls book that Michael Bowman Moore had just released. It arrived in the mail that day. I said, boy, these ancestors want me to know you on the right track tonight. So I said, oh, freedom time.
Yeah.
It got to be freedom time. And we had finally finished raising all the money and finally the statue that we had fought for with the late Reverend Kenneth Hodges was going to be unveiled. And I was ready for the shout. I was ready for the libation ceremony. I was ready for all of that. I wasn't ready for that. Once we got to the church, there wasn't that many people there that night. But it was all right. Because I felt like I sat on the porch. And before I'd gone and sat down on the porch, I'd gone into the annex. And there was Dr. Edda Fields-Black. And I spoke with her, and she said, but I think we're related. So we're going to do our DNA, but we're going to find out. And we're going to do DNA on all this rice that she been wading in the water getting through, and wading all up these rivers and going up these rivers, going up here, getting Lincoln's prize. That I done told y'all that Lincoln's statue was missing when I got to Manchester, but it's okay because my sister got it on her prize now, and I ain't mad at you. You took it home. I was looking for him in the street. It's all good. And I was in Mexico. I took a picture with him on the street, but the prize was even better. And so then when I saw, I mean, my email don't stop now. It's like I can't keep track of all the awards that I see coming through for this book, Combee. So I want you all to give a resounding applause to Pullitzer Prize winning Gullah Geechee Dr. Edda Fields-Black.
Combee began in a cemetery in Colleton County back in 2013 when I asked our family patriarch, "Where is the Fields family buried?" And he responded with the name of a plantation in Colleton County. It happened to be a plantation, the owner, during the antebellum period, I was researching their papers for what I thought was going to be my new book. So here I am, the historian, the scholar on one hand, and the descendant, the granddaughter, on the other. My grandparents left Green Pond, Whitehall in the 50s, early 50s, and migrated to Miami, Florida, where I was born. So we came back every summer, we came back for burials, and I knew the cemetery that's connected to Whitehall AME Church. I didn't know anything about this plantation cemetery, but that's where the Fields family was buried, our family patriarch said. I went out there and it was growed up. He told me it's going to be growed up. And, you know, I'm a Miami girl, so I didn't know what that meant. He told me that the graves were not marked. I had no idea what he was talking about. When I got out there, I also found that one of our graves was damaged. It was open, it was full of water, and our ancestors' skeletal remains were floating at the top. Okay? find out that both sides of my dad's family, his mother and his father's people, were buried on this plantation. I have to tell you, it changed my life. It changed my life. It is as if the ancestors came down and turned me in the direction they needed me to go, because I wasn't moving fast enough and I wasn't stepping hard enough. And so they were like, send her to the cemetery so she could see that her ancestors are swimming in their graves and they need her to play her position. And it took time. I grieved for, I'm still grieving. And we'll be trying to work on the cemetery this trip. You know, every time I'm down here, I'm in the cemetery. I was looking for Hector Fields. He was our oldest known ancestor. My cousin, the son of the family patriarch, had gone back in the census to the 1870 census. And he'd written down Hector Fields, father, son, down to our great-grandfather. So now I'm looking for Hector Fields. And I turned to my friend Tony Carrier, who at the time was the executive director of Center for Family History at IAAM. This is before the museum was open. The Center for Family History was programming and building. Tony took one look at the census. She said, oh, that's Hector Fields. He's a Civil War veteran from Beaufort. I said, Beaufort? We're from Colleton. We don't know anybody in Beaufort. We don't have any family in Beaufort. And she kind of patted me. She patted it. She's like, it's okay, and I'll take care of it. Long story short, Tony, I went to the National Archives and I got Hector's pension file. Not much was there. Tony and I curated a list of 2nd South Carolina soldiers who had the same surnames as my dad's family. I got 7 pension files. I brought them home. I looked at them. It was clear to me I wasn't related to these people. I filed them. Months later, I went back to my files and I read them. People were testifying about the Combee River raid in their pension files. At the time, I was working on a book which I thought was going to be a history of the Gullah Geechee. I was working on the libretto for Unburied, Unborn, Dunmark, a symphonic work that is collaborative with John Weinglass. And the Combee raid was a part of these 2 projects, right? But I kept finding these primary sources that I knew no historian had written about before. But I didn't know what I was to do with them. I didn't know how they fit together. I just put them in my basket and I kept going. Now I find in the pension files, people testifying about the Combee raid. I'm looking for my ancestors, and my ancestors are directing me to these files so that I was able to confirm the 2 companies that were formed the morning after the raid, after 756 people are freed by Harriet Tubman, the 2nd South Carolina Volunteers, the 3rd Rhode Island Heavy Artillery, 1 battery. 150 men from the Combee, aged 14 to 70, joined the 2nd South Carolina Volunteers the next morning at Tabernacle Baptist Church and formed 2 companies. So I'm looking for my ancestors. It's like, oh, these are the 2 companies because people are testifying in pension files from those companies about the raid. Okay. So I'm still off doing my thing, not sure what direction I'm supposed to be going in, but gathering puzzle pieces, I like to call them. The next came with, Tony called me one day and said, check your email, I found Hector. She found Jonas Fields' pension file, Hector's brother. We only knew Hector father to son, we didn't know his siblings. We didn't know their parents. I opened this pension file, First of all, Hector has a brother and a sister. The brother's name is Jonas. Jonas was also the name of our family patriarch who sent me to that plantation cemetery. Okay. Sister's name is Phoebe Washington. Phoebe testifies about her brother, Hector and Jonas. She talks about where the family was in bondage in Beaufort, downtown, held by the Verdier family. They're naming names, okay? Very specific. Downtown, James Verdier held them in bondage. Talk about how the family got separated before the war. When James Verdier's daughter got married, he gave Phoebe to his daughter as a wedding gift. They get separated again during the war, after the Battle of Port Royal, or before, when Verdier evacuated. He sent the men to one state, the women to another state. Separated Jonas from his wife. The wife becomes mentally ill and they never lived together again. There were several people in that pension file who testified that they grew up with Jonas Fields, my uncle. They named, I think I mentioned this, their parents, my great-great-great-grandparents, Anson and Judy Fields. And then Phoebe talks about, in the 1890s, her brothers, Hector and Jonas, left Beaufort. They went to Colleton. She says where they settled in Colleton, which was right where our family patriarch, Jonas Fields, lived and died. That's where we thought the Fields family was from, okay? So this is the pension files. And it gave me the notion that I could identify the people who were liberated in the raid and reconstruct the Combee community. 7 rice plantations that were burned to the ground, and many of those 756 freedom seekers. And so I started gathering, with the help of IAAM, Center for Family History, all of the pension files for these 2 companies, and databasing them, transcribing them, databasing them, and knitting them together. We added Freedmen's Bank records, the pension, evidence from the pension files, the censuses. And then I noticed in those files I talked about people testifying to their sale, their mortgage, being given away, being passed down in families. This is all in my database. Decide I can actually, number one, I'm taking the freedom seekers at their word. If they say they were sold and mortgaged by this person, I believe them. And I believe I can find the documents. And we did. The documents, the wills, the estate records, the marriage settlements, the bills of sale, the mortgages, these are all planters' family papers in which they listed their slave transactions. Most of these folks were not, overwhelming majority, were not sold on the auction block, not on the rice plantations. They were sold within families. Within families. And people were used, our ancestors were used as collateral. So you have these documents where someone was sold to one person, then that person would mortgage them back to the same owner. It's like taking out a loan and securing it with people, right? And I have to tell you, this is all, I won't say all, let me not get too excited. The majority of this information is publicly available. Okay, it's publicly available. And what it took was doing a little bit of genealogy in the planter families. Because people said, I was owned by this person, right? And I was owned by that person. So going into that person's wills and estate records, which is all online, it's not
in their personal possession, right? This information is accessible to us, is my point. And you're gonna see how I'm gonna bring this point to a head in a minute. Okay, so there are a lot of interesting things about this because I just was with the Society of Civil War Historians last night who have given Combee has earned the Tom Watson Brown Book Award from the Society of Civil War Historians. And the Lincoln Prize and the Pulitzer Prize. And the Civil War historians in particular were very skeptical about Harriet Tubman. The Civil War historians also like to put their hand on my shoulder and tell me, you know, the records for Beaufort and Colleton County were burned. And so you're never going to find what you're looking for. Those slave transactions don't exist. Well, what they didn't know, which I did, was that in that rice country, the planters didn't actually live there. May to around Thanksgiving, early May to the first hard frost of the winter, it averages out to Thanksgiving. They were in Charleston and Savannah. They might be on the Sea Islands. They could be in North Carolina mountains, Flat Rock. They could be in Newport, Rhode Island. They didn't live there. The Middleton family was sort of the extreme because they went to Rhode Island. They owned multiple rice plantations on the Combee. They had one small house where the sons would go back and forth as they're working with the overseers. They made their money on the Combee. They didn't live there. So there were no records. Their records weren't there to burn. The records were in Charleston. So I've had the pleasure of putting my hand on your shoulder and saying, 1965 to 2024, and y'all never looked. The records are in Charleston. And now the records are in Columbia on microfilm. And that microfilm is on Ancestry and Family Search, so you can sit in your living room after you find your ancestors' pension file and hear who they say enslaved them. You can go to that person's family tree and find their wills, estate records, marriage settlements, because white women own slaves too. Right? They often, in terms of inheritance, they inherited slaves, their brothers inherited land, because the fathers and the mothers wanted to be sure the women were kept at the standard to which they were accustomed to. That's why my aunt was given away as a wedding gift. She was probably a lady's maid, right? So you can do this from your own home, and you don't even have to go to the National Archives anymore to get a pension file, right? These things are being digitized. You can order it from the National Archives, and it will arrive in your inbox, okay? So, this is what led me to Harriet Tubman. This is and of course rice, because the Combee River raid took place on 7 rice plantations. And I've been researching rice in West Africa and the South Carolina and Georgia Low Country for 35 years. And the challenge with Harriet Tubman was finding something new to say about her life. And the pension files, that was the first piece, that there was something new to be said about the raid. But I also had to combat the skepticism of the Civil War historians. And I think that skepticism largely came because Harriet Tubman's activities are not described in the official military record. They wouldn't take Harriet Tubman at her word because Tubman talked about the Civil War for the rest of her life. She talked about the Combee raid in her autobiography and in biographies and in interviews she gave, but they didn't believe her. That's another conversation. So what I did was to find independent evidence, and much of that evidence came from Beaufort, because Tubman arrives in Beaufort in May of 1862 after the Battle of Port Royal. She arrives as part of the Port Royal experiment when the Northern teachers, the labor organizers, the missionaries came down and opened schools and stores. They ran refugee camps. They managed the labor of freed people, freedom seekers in the Sea Island cotton plantations. Tubman comes down in that context, though she's not any of those things. She was a spy. But it's in their letters, and it's interestingly enough, in the letters of the children, the adult college-age children of people whom Tubman worked with in Massachusetts, who come down. They grew up in the movement, they went to college, the Battle of Port Royal happened, 8,000 black people are free, and finally this thing that they grew up hearing about, watching their parents work and organize and lecture, it's actually happening. So many of them left school and came down, and they wrote letters home. And I like to say they wrote letters about Aunt Harriet. It's like, Mom, I saw Aunt Harriet today, and this is what she's doing. So I was able to collect that independent evidence. I'm gonna tell you one piece and I'm gonna close it out. This is a piece about Harriet Tubman and what happened before the Combee raid that enabled the raid to happen. Tubman and her men, she was the captain of men, and we know this, several pieces of evidence, but including a letter by Frederick Douglass's son, where he says she's the captain of men 8 or 9, and she captained Colonel James Montgomery on his most successful mission, which was the Combee raid. Tubman and her men were on the Combee River before the raid. They infiltrated the Confederate plantations. They found, from gathering intelligence, enslaved men who were forced to mine the Combee River with torpedoes or landmines. This is done by the Combee planters to keep the Union from getting up the river. Tubman and her men come back a second time before the raid, infiltrating Confederate plantations. This time they bring with them the officers of the U.S. Army, probably the 3rd Rhode Island Heavy Artillery, because they were artillerists, they blew stuff up, that's what they did. And they defused those torpedoes and they removed them. And this opened the river up to the U.S. Army boats. So much of this was in a letter that Tubman's nephew wrote in the 1930s to one of her biographers who was dismissed. Until I found a freedom seeker who was picked up by the U.S. Army Provost Marshal a week before the raid, who described the torpedoes. He described the torpedoes on the Combee River, okay? He was also, his son was in my database. Father was too old, son was too young to enlist, but they had testified for other people in pension files. And so in reconstructing the Combee community, I'm also able to reconstruct Harriet Tubman's leadership on the Combee raid. I'm going to close and I'm going to read you a short excerpt from Combee, from the afterword. Toward the end of my back to the cemetery on the rice plantation on Couples Creek, where relatives from both sides of my dad's family are buried, and which first impelled me to write the libretto for Unburied, Unmourned, Unmarked Requiem for Rice. Like most African American cemeteries in the South Carolina Low Country, it is built on higher ground, though it is still below sea level, overlooking a creek. Over almost a decade, I have spoken publicly about the shock, horror, and grief I felt after I visited the cemetery and encountered the open grave of one of my ancestors. A tree limb must have fallen and cracked open the concrete slab covering his final resting place, and pieces of the slab and the wooden vault fell into the shaft. The open shaft was full of water and his skeletal remains floated at the top. Soon after my first visit in 2013, our family repaired the open grave and reinterred our ancestors' remains. Nonetheless, the experience fundamentally changed me as a person and as a historian. I have spoken less frequently of the fact that I actually went to the cemetery looking for the unmarked graves of Hector Fields' descendants. Their unmarked graves, most just depressions in the ground, slight concavities where the earth on top of the wooden coffins has sunken in over time, still haunt me. They are rendered invisible when the vegetation is grown up after the end of hunting season. No matter where I am, even sitting at my desk in my offices in Pittsburgh, I can call up the cemetery in my imagination when I need to recollect why the work I am doing is important, why I am doing it in the first place, and why it is mine to do. My ancestors' unmarked graves induced me to undertake the painstaking task of recovery and prompted me never to give up. I wanted to extend what could be said and known about the lives of enslaved people and tell the story of the enslaved who liberated themselves in the Combee River Raid. Because of the pension files, I knew it was possible to unearth the voices of formerly enslaved people, let them tell their own stories, and compel the planners' records to speak to our enslaved ancestors, my enslaved ancestors. I knew I could contribute to the restoration of the humanity, which the institution of enslavement was designed to strip away, from the first reference I found to gunboats, and then from the names of siblings, parents, grandparents, cousins, aunties, uncles, and sweethearts going back 4 generations, and references to weddings, childbirth, funerals, and burial practices in the pension files, and to family groupings in the planner's documents. And speak to me, they did. The Combee freedom seekers' acts of liberation and self-determination erased their traces in the planters' historical records and destroyed those records. Simultaneously, when the social order turned upside down and the enslaved people liberated themselves, becoming free people, soldiers, and liberators, it created a small fissure in what had seemed an impenetrable edifice. With this crack, black soldiers could support themselves and their families because of the bounties and pensions due them for their military service in the Civil War. And because of their pension files, they, along with their widows, children, and neighbors, could tell their stories of enslavement and freedom in their own words. The world turned upside down on June 2nd, 1863, and the Combee River Raid teaches us much more about the intimate lives, loves, families, and labors of enslaved and formerly enslaved people, finally from their own words, than we ever knew before. With approximately 83,000 African American Civil War veterans approved for pensions, there may be tens of thousands more stories their pension files could tell, and thousands of enslaved communities, their files could be used to reconstruct. In commemoration of the 160th anniversary of the Combee River Raid on June 2nd, 2023, we had a lot to celebrate. We can say we know who risked their freedom and their lives to execute one of the greatest slave rebellions in New World history. And we know who got on the boat, liberated themselves, and reunited their families in the raid. Our enslaved ancestors don't have to be nameless, faceless, or storyless any longer. In addition to freedom, this is one of the greatest and most enduring legacies of the Combee River Raid and of Harriet Tubman's Civil War service. We are finally able to say their names, and saying our ancestors' names and telling our stories are pillars of Black freedom in the 21st century.
Awesome. So now, interesting that we've taken this journey through cotton, rice, and indigo, the burial areas that we are still fighting for right now. And there is a difference between a cemetery and a graveyard. That's why I use the term burial area. So we hear it's all rolled up. That's usually a graveyard, which is an African tradition, to allow it to be natural. And in our tradition as Gullah Geechees, many times the headstones were a potted plant, a tree, a carved out piece of wood, various things like that. And we have 5 seasons in the Gullah Geechee Nation, and one of them is hurricane season. So therefore, can you imagine all that they've gone through in living and in death through these hurricanes? So when she talked about seeing that grave open, each time I've heard her say it, I see it. Because I've witnessed here, we've witnessed here, actual caskets out of the graves. And people wading in the water to push them back in and hoping that on the casket is a serial number where they can identify which funeral parlor bought that casket so they can hopefully tie it back to figure out who that is to put them back in the ground. And today, our work here today has put more into the ground. When I said good soil, we planted seeds in the soils of these hearts and minds today. But when we talk about, if you say the word Sankofa, and in the Caribbean they say go back and fetch it. But as my mother and others taught us, if one ain't know 100 a day from 100 guy know 100 a guy. That's how we say it here. And so one of the things that my ancestors gave me 30 years ago when I founded the Gullah Geechee Coalition, it came to me in a vision, and now people are erroneously putting on the internet that it's a Gullah proverb. It's not a Gullah proverb. It's a saying, it's a slogan of the Gullah Geechee Coalition to say, one must take care of the root for heal the tree. But you got to dig down to get the roots, and that's why we sat with Dr. Ramona LaRoche yesterday with the workshop for you first, but dig for Hona Gullah Geechee roots. And then to come in and find out the other ways in which you can put the entire, not maybe the whole thing, but a large part of your family story together, because it is accessible to us. We have the ability to use the devices. I am a computer scientist and mathematician by degrees. I studied engineering. I graduated with honors. A lot of people think I'm a historian. That is not what my degree is in, but it's something I've loved since I was 3 years old. And so I think I have more knowledge of that than I do of the things that gave me the paper for on the wall. But I say it to say this. This thing that most of y'all either have in your pocket, or you've been holding it, or you've been getting the jills,
because I didn't let you have it on during the session. You're sitting and shaking, you know, because y'all are addicted to it. This is not a phone.
This is what we called before PDA, a personal digital assistant. It is a miniature computer. When I first started, Felicia is here too, when we first started studying computer science, the CPU or the brain of the computer was as big as this building we're in. And we said, at some point, you'll put a computer in your pocket. And that's what you have here. But your first real computer God gave you when you came out your mama's womb. And the more you use this, the less you use this. So as a computer scientist, I encourage you to turn this off and listen. Because the ancestors even speak the knowledge you're seeking on TikTok, and time is running out. I'm on there, so I know what you do. I'm talking about you. But this, the time is running out for us to be able to share with elders and ancestors and learn directly from them these oral histories, to combine with all of these pieces that we told you of how to do further research, so that you get that family story that you can pass down to the next generation.
And like I said, we, all of us right here, we get to sit on the oak tree, we get to be here a couple of days, we just have a food right the creek right there, so I got a cast net so we won't stall down. All right, so it is wonderful having the opportunity to do this with them. This is a stellar group. This has been so revealing, and the flow of what we've all been able to connect to and connect with through all the research, all the work that you all are still continuing to do to help us tell our story. You know, I've always been an advocate, but people need to stop reading books that's been written about Gullah Geechees by non-Gullah Geechees. You need to come to Gullah Geechees and know who we are down here and take a look at that, because the other rest of the people ain't none of we tall, and they even know who we fussed up. Okay? So, y'all need to stop going to these other people buying their books and then doing TikTok and YouTube videos thinking you're an expert on our culture. We live the culture. We fight for the culture. We've been here, we in the guano with Tulsa.
Okay.
And so we are thankful that, as I said, everyone up here, no matter what other people tried to tell us about who we were not, thank God we know who we are. And so I thank you for the work each of you continue to do. And anytime I can help you in that work, I will do that. But to have us all in one room tonight, Dr. LaRose told me yesterday, she said, I don't know how you did that. That's going to be fire tomorrow. So definitely, and to have her here with all of us, it's a beautiful thing. But my thing is, we right back to this flow. You don't grow rice without a lot of water, right? We don't even get that cotton growth. We don't get the right amount of water on it. And sure enough, our human bodies are made primarily of water. So even when we talk about this flow of conversation and dialogue, and we talk about crossing the big pond or not, there's that flow of water. And as we believe here, the water to bring you the water might take you back. And so I want to start with Angel, and then move to Dr. Toure, and then move to Dr. Paige, and then move to Dr. Edda Fields-Black, to just give some closing words around the flow that you are feeling, and where we feel our people need to be flowing to. And when I say our people, I mean the global Black Gold family, because it was not lost on me that Dr. Edda Fields-Black wasn't even here when we started, but she started talking about ownership. But until you own who you are, and you say who you are, you won't have it. You will have what you say. So if you wake up every morning, look in yourself in the mirror and say, I am Black Gold. Or we be Gullah Geechee. When you say the word Gullah itself means people blessed by God. You will only have a blessing if you speak that blessing into existence. So therefore, it's about the flow and what you create or what you shut off, because a rice die can, right? We need to let the flow or we shut it off. And you shut it off too long, it stagnates. Everything else. So where do we need to flow to? Where do our people as Black Gold need to continue to flow to have more richness? Sister Angel?
You set that up so wonderfully. When I think about flow, and I know we use the terminology as a culture keeper, and it's important to keep the culture, but as of lately I've been thinking about how I carry the culture, how I flow. What does it mean to be a carrier? And it's a part of who you are, it's a part of how you move, it's a part of how you work with people and collaborate. It becomes your flow. And so when you know who you are, and you know whose you are, and you know where you come from, then you know how to move in this world with grace. You know how to move in this world with humanity. And so my flow for you tonight would be a flow towards collaboration, a flow towards that which we were brought up in. I'm from a small town called Ridgeville, South Carolina, so you say Colleton County, I know about it, it's right by Dorchester. And we were a communal people. And we are forced into a time now, and I hate to say forced, because we see how we're being squeezed right now with all that is going on in the U.S. and its administration. But it is reminding us of that of old, where we came together, where we flowed together to make sure that everybody had what they needed. No one went hungry. It was always two pots, one for your household, one for the community. And so for us to flow in that way again, move back into the flow of community. And you have to do that first by passing on the knowledge to the younger generation so they can even know who they are, to reinstill hope and teach them the ways so that they can carry the culture forward, so that we can all carry it going forward and continue to flow in a way that will continue to preserve who we are, people, place, and culture.
Ça nous say petite Guinée, voici danser, family too. Everyone is a child of Africa. The neighbors are family too. My history, my culture cannot be reduced down to hoodoo, sweetgrass baskets, or singing. Some of us come here thinking it's all about hoodoo, it's about sweetgrass baskets. No, it's not. And I tell people this all the time. No child is an accident. No child is an accident. And when we talk about DNA, we talk about flow, we talk about rice, then along the Savannah River, there's a family that's out in Charleston, South Carolina, the Manigos, that you identify only with them. But then they had these concentration camps that I call plantations, actually. And so they have them in a place called Jasper County, South Carolina. They also have them in Chatham County, Georgia. And so on Gallery, the infant mortality rate was 90%. And then we go down coastal Georgia, we go to McIntosh County. The children mortality rate was 75%. So I tell people, if you are here right now, you are destined to be here. You are divinely put here. There is no accident. So because you are here, that means you have divine purposes in your lives. So that's what you're supposed to do. You should now fulfill your divine purposes, not just one purpose, but purposes. So we've all been ordained to be here. And so we have a day clean proverb that goes, an African proverb that goes, a mosquito will not teach an elephant to be an elephant. A mosquito will teach an elephant to be a mosquito. And I see elephants walking around here trying to fly, but they're supposed to be walking around here with power, majesty, glory, and the divineness. And that's what we must walk in, our divineness and understanding. You are not here by accident. You are divinely put here because some people never made it. And that's why your DNA in your genes is a part of victory. God did not say family too. Look out for the family always. We are divinely blessed.
Knowing where you're from is your birthright. It's just that simple. And so you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to those who came before us. They want us to remember who they are. They want us to know who they are. You're going to want your legacy to know who you are. And knowing where you're from is where it all begins. So I would say that knowledge and understanding should be included in your flow so that you're constantly learning about yourself, constantly learning about what you can offer and the impact that you can make on your community and on a global scale, because Africa needs us too.
So I'm
I'm going to end where I began, which is in the graveyard on the rice plantation in Colleton County, where my ancestors are buried. There's one thing, I think, in my whole life that I regret, and that is that I did not go with our family patriarch to the cemetery to find out where the Fields family is buried. He's the only one who knew. So I end here to say that we have libraries in our family. We have libraries in our community, and they are our elders. And the place where we can start is by sitting with our elders and listening to them tell their stories. And sometimes young people, and I call myself a young person, we're too busy. We got too much going on, or we think we do. But we need to circle back to the source. Because at this moment in time, there are powers that be that are trying to erase our history. And what we need to understand is that we can tell our own stories. We can pass our history down to our children. And the best way to do that is to start by learning it, researching it, discovering it in our homes, in our churches, in our lodges, in our fraternities and sororities. We have all these wonderful ways that we organize ourselves. Let's organize ourselves on listening to our elders and teaching our children who they are today so that we can continue to move forward in our divine light tomorrow.
Yeah. I would like Dr. Ramona LaRoche to come forward. I want to make sure to give you this, that you be doing the hot plates and make them in the hot. We appreciate you. Carry your fan and your family with you. Yeah. Love you. And because we are here at Penn Center, I made sure to ask Sister Ann of Gullah Sweetgrass Baskets to make something special for each of you. And so I kept trying to think of what should I tell her to make. And then God was like, "Well, you at Penn?" And I said, "That's right." That's a Penn Center bell. It's a Penn. They have rang the bell very loudly today. Right. To give us a call to action. And I think they deserve a round of applause. On behalf of the 41st Annual Penn Center Heritage Days Committee, I'm the chair of the committee. For those of you who came in late, and honey ain't no he don't think like that. Why don't you keep it, everybody? I'm also Queen Quet. I'm Chieftess and head of state for the Gullah Geechee Nation. So that's why if you see security keeping you from walking up on me, that's why. All right. So don't get mad. It's security. All right. And we have one of our board members. If you have a statement, because I'm cool. I'm about to do something. Okay. This is our board member from Penn. Trustee, Board of Trustees. This is Darrell Owens, who is also a native of St. Helena.
And a student at Penn Center.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank each of you all for coming. And not only has this been exhilarating, but it has been very enlightening. And so, again, we applaud our pulpit guests, and also a special thanks to Queen Quet for putting this together. Enjoy the rest of the festivities. Thank you.